So Heidi, welcome to Learning at Large. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really good, and yeah, really pleased that you can come on the show.
Me too.
So let's kick off with a bit of an introduction in case people have been living under a stone and don't know who you are. Um, Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, and what you care about.
Sure. So I'm Dr. Heidi Kirby, and I am an L&D consultant. I work for myself. It actually started as a website and a blog called Useful Stuff, and then I just kind of grew it into a consultancy and a community, and have just been kind of using it to do all the things I want to do in L&D. I'm very passionate about my work in L&D, and I come to the L&D space from having been an instructional designer, leading teams of instructional designers, and then way before that, being a college English professor. In terms of what I care about pets. I have one too many pets because I can't say no to poor little stray animals. I care much about authenticity and kindness in the sense of we're not nice no matter what, and sometimes we have those tough conversations, but it's because we're looking out for someone's best interest or genuinely trying to help them. Yeah, that's me.
Fab, thank you for that. Um, Always good to talk about pets first, I think, as well.
I know. Get that out of the way.
Yeah, haven't met anyone with sort of super unusual pet yet, but my the show is open to hear from people who've got a skunk or something strange as well.
I don't have a strange pet, but I do have I have a lot of older pets. I refer to us as the Golden Girls because there's three of them and me, so like the four of us. I have a 12-year-old cat, a 9-year-old dog, and I have a 10-year-old dog who is deaf and blind in one eye. And I adopted her like that.
Yeah.
So I never knew her before that. She is It's a personality. That's a totally different personality.
So you're giving them a good home.
Yes, I'm trying.
So today I think we're gonna dive into hopefully something that, well, I think both of us are probably passionate about, but particularly you, is kind of making learning useful or impactful, other people might say. Um, and so I wondered if we could just touch on that a little bit before we kind of dive into that
Sure.
kind of area, because a lot of people can get lured by the new trends and the new tech. Like, so give me a pitch for why we should just like get back to some fundamentals, like quit looking at the shiny stuff and get back to being useful.
Okay, so I want you to remember back in like 2017, 2018, and think about like the time when Pokemon Go came out, right? Remember that mobile game craze? And how at the time everyone was saying that VR and AR were going to be the next big thing in learning and development in instructional design. That every company was going to have a set of VR headsets and they were going to conduct virtual leadership development training, virtual onboarding with new hires, all of that kind of stuff using virtual reality or AR or whatever it was, right? Now, fast forward as we're starting 2025, you don't see that tech anywhere, right? We're not seeing it. Like, we're seeing it in industries where it has always made sense and has always existed and will continue to make sense, like flight simulation and some of the different trades where it's necessary to have a safe practice environment and it's best to do it virtually. But it's not everywhere like it claimed to be. And if we look around, we still have new hires. We still have a need for onboarding. We still have learning outcomes to achieve. We still have the need for those leadership development programs. We still have business outcomes and goals that we have to align with and achieve. Those things are all still there. The VR and the AR, that's the thing that's not there. It's the tech that keeps coming and going. The other stuff stays the same.
And do you think people give like enough airspace for those fundamentals in kind of the L&D world, or is it, do we get caught up in talking about the new and shiny stuff a bit too much?
I think there's kind of an inverted triangle that's kind of an unhealthy one because it's putting a lot of new people into the field that lack some of those fundamentals. But there's a lot of new people coming into the field who are kind of being sold this idea on purpose, right? Because someone wants them to pay them to learn how to use tools, right? And so they sell this idea that the tool is all you need to learn. And development is the only step of instructional design or learning and development or learning design that you need to have solid in order to get a job. And some people are getting a job, and a lot of times there's a lot of people in L&D leadership who hire people and then go, oh, these people aren't as skilled as I thought that they were, right, in those foundational things. L&D leaders aren't looking for it. I'm not sure if it's because they don't know what to look for or how to ask it during the interviews. And what I'm seeing in my practice as a consultancy is that a lot of my potential clients, I don't know the exact percentage, but a lot of them ask me to come help with projects because they've hired underqualified people. So it's a really big, like, it's a growing problem with new folks coming in who need some of those more foundational elements to be really successful.
That's interesting, yeah, because we are seeing lots of reports of new people coming in, SMEs starting to author,
Yeah.
um, new people coming into the profession from teaching. They have a background in learning at least, but a kind of
Yeah.
different kind of background as well in
Yeah.
some ways. So in your experience then, when maybe when you're pulled in when things have gone wrong, might be a bit strong, but aren't as good as they could be,
Sure.
like what are the major steps that have been missed? Like what are those fundamentals that are kind of like, if only this had happened, what are the key ones?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the places are running like a pizza shop, right? Like they're taking orders and they're taking orders from anybody who will send them. So it's structured in a way that's going to be very hit or miss for the audience, right? Because sometimes the person requesting the learning project is going to be right by happenstance or because maybe they do understand the problem or the issue. But a lot of times people think they have an idea about training from outside of the L&D department and they come with like an order, right? We've all heard this, like, I need a 2-hour in-person training or a 30-minute e-learning, and you're like, where did that number come from? And it's come from nowhere. Like, it's just an arbitrary number that they've decided is like, this is what we need, right? And so, like, we're not even asking those simple questions at the beginning to figure out, is that really what you need, right? So it starts there, and then it kind of goes. A lot of what I'm seeing is people are choosing the tool first and then forcing the solution into that tool rather than looking at the problem, looking at the questions that they've asked, looking at the learning outcomes, and deciding what solution is going to be best based on
So you got like a wonky jigsaw from the start, right? So if you haven't got the right
that.
problem, you're finding the wrong pieces. Right?
Yeah, of
Yeah,
course. Yeah, the way to solve the problem is not the best way, right?
yeah, yeah. So like in an ideal world, we've already talked about that kind of problem solving side of things, like finding out what's actually needed, not necessarily listening or just listening to the major stakeholder who's maybe presented the problem to you, but digging deeper. Like what else would you add to your kind of wish list if like if you're talk about best practice here, like what things would you want to impart? Like let's give some examples of what people should be doing.
Yeah, I think collaboration. I think something that is missed is like having regular conversations with the SMEs and stakeholders who are involved. I think a lot of times, and I've done this too when I was newer and I didn't understand. And it's hard to take feedback. It's hard to get into the mindset and the process of taking constant feedback and not allowing it to get to you and just being really open to the fact that someone's gonna tear apart this thing that you worked really hard on, right? I think there's a mindset shift that has to happen for that to be a successful conversation. But I think the communication from the very start is really important. And I think having regular time set up with the people that are involved and having, like, showing them what you're working on. Sometimes I think we get a little territorial. And like you said, SMEs are now creating content and we have an opportunity to teach them. And instead we're just saying, no, stop, right? And what we should be doing is partnering with them rather than saying, no, stop what you're doing and let me do it, right? That's not the best way. So setting up those, like having those conversations, building that trust, right? So that that person trusts you for the solution that you come up with that is counter to what they ordered, right? you have to be able to build that relationship and that trust and show that you are experienced and have expertise by showing a plan or showing something that you're working towards.
Yeah, nice. I like the partnering and collaboration point is a key one, like because there is also that maybe there's a kind of duty from those of us who know, about learning design that should be trying to bring people on rather than, as you say, just say, no, don't touch it. We know this field.
Right.
This is our field. That everything's going to change, like especially with AI coming in, right? We have to accept that things are going to change, but how can we impart best practice? How can we help show examples that are really good, right?
Well, and I think what's interesting is that AI can only has, in all the tests that I've seen, can only help us with the development piece, right? It's not got the nuance to be able to help with needs analysis. It can make suggestions, right? It can help guide us with, whatever we want to use it for. But if we're like the real needs analysis, the solution design, right? Like I can't really feed in the level of nuance needed to choose the right intervention or solution to AI right now. But it can do the content creation and development just like the SMEs can all day. And I wonder why we're being so protective of the development part when it's such a small part of what we can do as learning designers, right? We can do needs analysis. We can measure the impact of what we're creating. We can choose a solution that's not a boring e-learning that has really serious impact.
I like that thought, yeah, because I think there's a lot of people who are questioning, like whether, if you just keep AI helping you with the kind of content production side of things, then you're missing a trick, right? So maybe over time that will come true as AI improves. But actually, what you're saying is, hey, like, why not let that bit go? Because actually, if you feed it the right prompts, if you, as a designer, if you're thinking about the real problem in the right way in the first place, then actually the content production side is not really where the money's at anyway.
Yeah, and you can have it help you. The best way I've seen it being used in L&D right now is people are like, "Oh, we're having it help us with the stuff that we don't like to do." And that's exactly how I use it. I
Mm-hmm.
don't like writing course descriptions and intros and like there's mundane writing tasks that I just loathe, right? And so that's where I ask for help or I ask for help with like functionality checks or accessibility checks, right? Like check my work, check my writing, not create it, right?
Yeah, it makes sense. Like, I mean, who's proofing the reading, right? The writing now, like everyone's proofreading through AI. That's an obvious one, right? And
Right.
so you can go further. But even so, with QA, you'd still want to feed it further checks and balances in which to weigh your work up
Absolutely.
against, right? But that's again comes
Yeah.
from the designer. Okay, yeah, cool. I want to like roll back from AI a little bit, which is although there can be low tech solutions we're just talking about with AI, but what are your kind of favorite examples or ideas of where learning has been perhaps achieved through kind of simple low tech solutions that can drive kind of exceptional results, but definitely haven't gone down the shiny tools route?
Yeah, so I think this would be considered low tech, even though it involves tech. It was kind of like the most obvious choice. It was so obvious we all missed it at first, right? So it was one of those situations where I was working with a client and they had this order in mind. They wanted a 30-minute e learning to help their hiring managers with the hiring process because it was lengthy and complex. And they had an intranet where they had all of the information stored. And when I looked at it initially, I was like, word salad. There was so much to it. It wasn't clear which steps to follow when. There were like many steps. There were 5 steps, but those 5 steps were broken down into multiple other steps. So even just looking at it, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is so confusing." And so I said, well, if this is for hiring managers, they're probably not hiring every month, right? Maybe once or twice a year, maybe once a quarter if they have high turnover, which some of them do. But if we do a 30-minute e learning, how often are they going to have to go back and take this 30-minute e learning to remember what they need to do? And that's how I posed it to the people I was working with. They were like, oh, that's a really good point. So instead of coming in and being like, no, we're not doing this, I was like, listen, how effective do you really think this is going to be? And when I put it to them that way, they were like, oh, yeah, I guess that doesn't make sense, but what can we do? And I said, well, first of all, I'm confident we can simplify this language, how it's written on the intranet, and make it more cohesive, more like a checklist. But then what I also realized, and it took a lot of people looking at the solution a while to figure this one out. They were having people upload PDFs of hiring documents, right? And sending multiple emails to different places. And it dawned on me that everyone at that organization had access to DocuSign. And I went, why don't we automate this part? And then now all we have to do is have clearer steps and then just a link out. And hopefully that'll reduce the amount of errors. Well, that was like, oh my gosh, how did we not see this before, right? And I think that would be considered a low tech solution because it's using tech you already have that's not really designed for a learning solution, right? But it was one of my favorite interventions, and everyone was really excited about it, and really, like, people started using it almost immediately. And they were like, this is so much easier. Like, the feedback was phenomenal. And I guarantee you, if we had done a 30-minute e-learning, the feedback would not have been that phenomenal.
It's a case where you're actually presented with what looks like a learning problem, but actually there is a kind of process problem and then an information or
Yeah.
communication problem, right? Like,
Yeah. And, like, we can help with those things,
mhm.
too, right? Like, and we have to realize that sometimes our role doesn't just, like, we don't just pass it off and go, okay, well, I don't do DocuSign, so take this, right? Like, I sat in meetings with, like, IT and was there and didn't really offer much, but it's about connecting the right people too. That's our other role, I think, that we
Yeah,
don't talk about a lot, is that we connect a lot of different departments because we work with so many different ones.
yeah. And like that's a situation of a kind of a low tech solution, which is where you're focusing on the problem and you're fixing the problem, right? So that's perfect. That's what we talk about for performance consultancy. That's what we mean,
Exactly.
right? But like on the flip side, can you think of cases where you kind of feel justified going for, because that's kind of an inexpensive solution that you just described there, the low
Sure.
tech, like where it really kind of does make sense perhaps to go for, I don't know, an immersive scenario or some major storytelling campaign, like, like what's the flip side to that where you maybe can justify it?
Yeah, I think where storytelling is really useful and helpful is in sales enablement. I think that there's been a lot done in that field, especially in like customer education around storytelling as a way to educate customers, right? Because there's, of course, storytelling can be used for marketing, but it can also be used for education. And I think understanding the difference is really key. And when sales enablement people can tell a good story, they can convince you that you want to buy anything, right? So when those people are involved and they're teaching other people how to tell those stories and how to create those narratives, that can be really, really impactful. And it can happen in person with
Mm.
like no extra, like it can be a facilitated conversation or workshop, right? um Much like something like leadership development, right? You can do, we still need that, we still need those things,
Mhm.
and there are like easy ways that you can meet with your leaders in person or still have those quarterly get-togethers, and I think there's still value there. Like, and in terms of scenarios, like anywhere where you want someone to apply the information that they're learning, which is not always, right? Like
Mhm.
there are some contexts like onboarding, for instance, where you're just telling people where to go to find things, right?
And the
But if you
application needs
want
to be on the
people,
job, right? You need to kind of build that up.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. So then creating those realistic scenarios, and that's not something you can do on your own. Like that's something you need the help of a SME for. But once you do that, you can like, if you have the budget and it's that important, you can hire actors and get them to act out those scenarios on video. Or you can do, I was just actually showing my boyfriend last night, like a choose your own adventure game from the Commodore 64 computer, if anyone knows what that is. If you don't, look it up. It's very, very old. And it was all text based choose your own adventure. You can do text based scenarios as multiple choice questions. I do it all the time. And have it be a really relevant actual use case with lengthy answer choices to really kind of dig into that scenario. But it can be as kind of lo fi or hi fi as you want it
Yeah.
to be.
Yeah, and I think like it's remembering, for those who are new in, if you hear that storytelling is good, or you hear that, hey, you need to get more immersive and more interactive. Interactive, I don't mean clicking, I mean, interacting
Yes.
your brain. Yeah, definitely doesn't mean like do it everywhere either, like you were saying. Like
Yeah.
you can, because I don't know how many onboarding projects I've seen where they've had storytelling is good. So in comes the CEO to welcome you to the organization and tell you the entire history from beginning to end. But like actually, you're probably more interested in what your colleagues have got to share, or maybe what your predecessor was doing. Do you know what I mean? Like use it wisely, be
Yeah.
helpful with
Yeah.
it. I'm
Exactly.
not saying that we should ditch all CEO introductions, but the number of times you see them and it's like, oh really? Like,
It's so
yeah,
standard. Yeah. Yeah. And it always appears to be more about the CEO than about the new hires, right?
yeah. You've got to think about what's useful. What do they actually need to know to help them at this stage without overwhelming them, right? As well.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so if I gave you the opportunity to put some L&D practices in the bin forever, what might you choose to put in there?
Oh my gosh, there's so much.
It's quite a small bin, medium size maybe.
Okay, well, I won't clean out the whole closet then. I think first on my list would probably have to be, and this is a very personal cause for me, completions and smile sheets as data points for our learning, as sole data points. Let me clarify because people will be mad. But as sole data points, I think sometimes it does make sense to get smile sheets and to care about our learners' reaction. I don't think it makes sense all the time. I think sometimes we don't care if they like it or not. It's more about whether it's effective, right? Especially things like safety training and compliance. Um, Also, senior leadership really doesn't care about completions or smile sheets. Like, that's not the data that means anything to them. And in fact, there's been a shift in the workplace, and I think COVID was really kind of the shift or the thing that caused the shift. But efficiency and speed are more important than they ever have been. And if you say, oh, we have 100% of people completed all these courses, they spent 1,500 hours we spent 1,500 hours per employee on training last year. That is a really good way to put L&D on the chopping block if you don't have any other metric to support that, right? Like if that is your only metric and you don't have other impact metrics, you're putting yourself at risk
Yeah, I mean, if
because now you're
your employee
saying,
engagement rise like double, right, because of that, for example,
right,
then that's a good case, right? Because that is, I think, where we're not saying don't give any learning time. We're saying like
right.
make
We're
it
saying
count for
that you have
something.
to have more than just that
Yeah,
because otherwise the CEO is going to go, okay, you wasted how many hours of these people's time pulling them off the floor, pulling them away from their primary job, and what else do you have to show for it? Because they liked it is not good enough.
yeah. So that's going in the bin. Anything else you want to add in there?
We can throw a SCORM in the bin, but we'll save that whole conversation for another day.
That's a
Kind of goes along with it, right? Like that's
yeah,
the mechanism that gives us those terrible metrics anyway. So it's old. We don't need it. It came out in 2004. It's 20 years old. Come on.
yeah. It drives the mentality of completions, unfortunately, doesn't it? Um, I guess with that, like, do you think the shift to kind of being more skills focused, and the fact that, from my point of view, like, I don't know if you're seeing this too, that you've got more stakeholders kind of looking at that kind of skills focus than perhaps you have before in terms of like learning initiatives in organizations, because it's not come from L&D, it's come from outside. Do you
Yeah.
think like that will make the kind of measurement that we look for and the impact we look for better, or do you think it'll be like more of the same, just with a kind of skills wash over it instead?
So I think we're at a strange point in the industry where like we talked about before, like some people are worried about jobs because they're afraid that AI can replace them or this, that, and the other. And I think that the non L&D people's obsession with skills is more about performance.
Hmm.
They just don't know what to call it, right? And I think what they are looking for, and this has been my experience because in my PhD program in instructional design, we had to take a lot of courses on performance consulting and human performance technology. So I have a solid background in performance. And I think what leaders are getting at is that they care more about the behavior and the output and the performance than about the, like, this employee did 150 hours of training, or
Mm-hmm.
this employee completed 100% of all the courses they were supposed to take. And I think they're oversimplifying it because they just don't know, like, how to ask for what they want. But I think that the emphasis on skills is important because it gives us a very clear business objective to align to. Like, we have no more excuse anymore to not align with the business goals because they're adding these goals in,
Yeah.
like, specifically that have to do with us, and specifically calling on us to help with these initiatives, right? So I think that we really have to understand what they're actually asking for and make it very clear that they're not asking for more e-learning
Mm-hmm.
or more micro learning or more xyz, like more of the same output. They're asking for skills, and how those different skills are achieved are going to be very different.
It's a massive opportunity, isn't it? Like, the seat at the table phrase, which just that phrase I would put in the bin actually. Sorry, but that's
Yes. That's a
however
good
uses
one.
it. But here we go. We've got a table with many seats around it, right? The skills table, or whatever we want to call it. But yeah, it's a huge opportunity to get it right. But there's also, I think, I see a threat in that, you could boil the skills down to micro skills. You could then apply micro bits of learning or micro content to those, and it could be deemed like job done, like the that skills learning is available. So what's the excuse, right? It's there. So why, you've done the training, so hang on, where's the performance like improvement gone? Or as in
Yeah.
the onus on the employee, like to have, we've given you the training, so how come the skills haven't improved? But yeah, so I think there's opportunity and threat with it, that the content could get thrown at the problem, because content gets thrown at problems a lot. But I really, really hope maybe we can put a plea out to the L&D industry that we might take the opportunity to do something a little bit different
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, I think we have a chance, like you said, to do something really impactful, but also to, like, get that trust back, right? I think the reason why a lot of L&D people are being replaced with other people in the organization, I'm seeing that so much.
Mm-hmm.
Like, L&D people replaced with SMEs, replaced with marketing, replaced with, just like sales engineers, like customer success people. Anybody who's in the company can move to the L&D team. Like that's been my experience, and I think that has eroded trust, right? Because I think, like I said before, like, there's been people with kind of one skill set, and this is solely on the L&D leaders. This is nothing bad about anybody who's entering the industry, because it's the L&D's leaders' responsibility, obligation to make sure their own team is taken care of before taking care of the rest of the organization, right? How can we say to the organization, we know what to do and we can help you upskill and be the best skills organization in the game, but you're not upskilling your own team, and your own team can't even produce effective learning because they're not skilled enough? That's going to be a problem. And it's going to be exacerbated by bad hiring. But I think it's going to get worse for some companies, for some organizations who have not done good hiring with their L&D leaders and made sure that they have the skills needed to do the job, because they have a tall order in these organizations. Like, they're responsible for everyone else, but they're responsible for their team first, right? And I think that disparity is going to get much larger between good organizations and bad I use those terms very loosely, but like crappy boring learning versus like really effective good learning, right?
I wonder if it won't even be at organisation level, like with the pockets of people that are now getting involved in creating learning. Like we talked about earlier on, like actually it can just be a bumpy picture within an organisation, and there might be a mixture
True.
of great, good, and not so good, going on. But yeah, I guess it's the L&D's team's chance, if you still have a core team or whether they're decentralized, to make a case for what their remit is, like what they're responsible for. And we are not the content people. we are,
Right.
there's a chance we're going to
Right.
fail, right? Yeah, the interesting one. So I'm going to ask you another kind of thinking broadly question. So I'm going to give you a magic wand. It's
Okay.
invisible, obviously, because it's a magic wand, but here you go. Um, and you can do anything with it. You can change anything in L&D, be it a piece of new technology or some practices, whatever you want to do. What would you do with it?
Um, I would make it a requirement for all L&D leaders to have to provide professional development to their teams. I don't think that's a lot to ask, but it's not happening. And it's, we always say like that L&D teams are, what do they say? The cobbler's kids without any shoes, right? Like the shoemaker, he makes shoes for everyone else, and by the time he gets home, he's too tired to make shoes for his own kid. And I think that we do ourselves a huge disservice, because if we're going to play on metaphors, what we should do is put our own oxygen mask on before we help everyone else.
I thought you were going to say wear the best shoes, the best, shiniest shoes.
We should wear the best shoes. We should be the advertisement for shoes, right? Like, we should be wearing, like, the best stilettos and the most comfortable sandals and, like, the best steel toe work boots ever. But we just have, like, old dollar flip-flops from the dollar store.
A person I used to work with used to say that we're not very good at eating our own dog food. That was the way he
Yes.
put that, which is pretty gross, but kind of gets to the point.
It does.
But yeah, I think that it's a weirdly hard thing to do because we're always stretched for time. We're always trying to keep up with all the demands, and therefore then how do you justify that? But it's so important because especially with the new people coming in, right? People who are new to the field, or if you're trying to set up those SMEs out there for best practice, you need to be walking the walk, right? Not
Yes.
just talking it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I'd love to give you a wish, but unfortunately my magic powers are pretty limited. But if I could, then I would. I'm going to ask you one more of these kind of slightly sillier questions, but hopefully it will work out. So if you were stuck on a desert island, it's an L&D island, right? Because they exist. You can take a book on learning design with you, or something about learning, and you could take one person from the L&D world with you. Who are you going to take?
This is so great. The book that I would take. Okay, so is it bad that like I'm trying to think of this in a survivalist mode instead of like an L&D mode? And so I'm trying to think of like the thickest L&D book that I can, because I'm like, oh, I could make fire. Which L&D book do I want to burn? No, we're not
No,
answering the
it's like,
question
what's your
that way.
favorite book
No,
that
no,
you
no.
just couldn't live
What
without?
will inspire me?
Yeah.
And you know what? Oh man. I would have to say this old textbook that I still have, that's, gosh, it's probably from like, I think it's like 2007 version, but it's Reiser and Dempsey's Trends and Issues in Instructional Design. And it's like your pretty standard textbook, but it's like the history of instructional design. And Robert Reiser has a fantastic history of the field where he basically says that instructional design is the reason we won World War II. It's really cool. Very nerdy, but that's what I would take, and I would read it over and over. I am going to answer a survivalist answer for the who I would bring with me. I think if I had to choose, I would probably pick my L&D friend, Mark Shepard. I don't know if you know him, but he is Canadian and he is former military. So like he would be able to, and he's very resourceful, like a super resourceful ID. So I feel like he would also be able to help like survive on the desert island.
Nice. I like what you did there. Well, I am going to say a massive thank you then for joining me on the show. And it's been brilliant to have you as a guest. And thanks for focusing our minds back on the fundamentals about being useful and being impactful with our learning practices.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Thank you.